You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 151, Showbread, hosted by Dan Terry.
You can look in one direction and see, women dancing on poles, and then look in another direction and see fucking cows getting their skulls crushed in with hammers.
Buddy Reno.
I got a Google Home in my bathroom, and so whenever I'm going to take a shower, I say...
It's not what I thought you were going to say.
Taking a hot shower.
And Joseph Wren.
You can't see it, it's below the camera, but I'm touching my nipples right now.
Touching my nipples.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you came for the bread, but all there were was bagels, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. The Doomhammer returns.
Hey.
Buddy is here.
What up, dudes?
And we're talking about Showbread, because how do you follow up every time I die? You talk about Showbread.
And we had to pick an equally crazy band. We just had to. I don't know if it's the same type of crazy exactly, but, Showbread's a band, so we're going to talk about.
You're going to struggle through it already? Do they really do their own thing? Showbread and Cake are like the only two bands that kind of do their own thing, but when you really start digging down to it, it's mostly just lack of reverb. It's raw rock. That's what they want me to say.
Or what they did. Unfortunately, they're not around anymore, but, or maybe fortunately. We'll see how that goes as we go through their career.
Well, before we decide if nihilism is indeed not practical, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Dan told me to stop reading off places you can listen to the podcast. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at discussmetal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion, but we like more than that are comments, subscribers, people that share the episode. Sharing the episodes is probably the best thing that you can do for this podcast because, you want your friends and family and grandparents and aunts and uncles to hear the type of vile stuff that we throw down on this podcast. So in order to let them know that that's happening, you should share the episodes. It would be a really, really, really great thing to do and really help us get some exposure that we so desperately need. So we survived another industrial December, Joe.
By hook, by crook, by the glory that is industrial metal, we did in fact survive. We survived episode 150 with Brandon Kellum and John Beatty of Brutally Speaking.
It was kind of nice. I got to just sit back and let them do all the work.
I mean, that's a big number, because I remember, hearing episode 3 with you guys. So.
I remember episode 9 and episode 9.5.
Yeah. There was definitely, it definitely goes back quite a bit, all the way to 0.
Does it go back to 0? I thought we started at 1.
We did start at 1. A lot of podcasts do an episode 0, but we didn't really, because we were still kind of trying to figure out what the show was in episode 1. So luckily we've kind of followed that formula through 150 episodes, and here we are 3 years later doing the same thing again, and it's fun. We got a couple of comments on our social medias. Over on Facebook, in reference to our Bile episode 149, Michael Newton says, "Oh, hell yes. Got my start with these guys when I was like 11 on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack. Bile and Fear Factory were both my true introduction to heavy metal. First thing is ever heard from the genre. And Bile honestly scared the shit out of me. Became a big fan much later, but I'll never forget my extreme confusion when hearing I Reject for the first time. Can't wait to listen to the episode." And Josiah Russell says, "Love it. Stoked Bile made it into Industrial December." Well, I gotta say, Josiah, you're the reason why it did, because Josiah helped us find the Bile albums that we needed to listen to, and he made that episode happen. So hats off to you, my friend, for allowing the Bile to flow as it flowed.
Where were you when we needed the first 2 Showbread records?
Oh, I know. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Over on Instagram, Do the Logo says, "Loved the Static X episode. Thank you, Dan and Joe. Keep on trucking."
I don't drive trucks. They're too big and I'm too blind.
I've driven trucks. I drive a truck for work.
You can handle it, dude. I've seen you drive two 18-wheelers at the same time.
I don't remember that, so that must have been pretty intense.
I've driven a truck, but it's like Frodo riding a horse. Doesn't really make sense.
That's topical.
Was that a short joke on yourself, buddy?
A little bit, yeah. Self-burn, those are rare.
You might be short, but you are perfectly balanced.
I wonder what Buddy would look like rotoscoped.
Probably
no.
the exact same way, except painted.
It'd just be cartoon Buddy.
Yeah.
I love it.
Welcome to Blue Man Reno. It's a one-man show. So, Dan, tell me about Showbread.
Showbread is one of the wackiest bands to ever grace the face of Solid State Tooth and Nail, or Christian rock, or hardcore, or punk, or whatever style you think that Showbread is. They're a very strange band that has done a lot of strange things, and a lot of it I liked, some of it I didn't like, but they have a really interesting history, actually, because they actually started as a worship band for a Southern Baptist church, and then I guess they started playing music that was like more rock focused or something, and they were basically asked to leave the church when they started playing music that the church thought was evil.
Raise your hand if you've been there before.
I haven't been there. I mean, to be perfectly honest, a lot of the churches that I've gone to have been pretty cool about that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not surprised that happened, especially considering how weird Showbread is. But yeah, they basically just decided to continue to make music, and this is like in the late 90s. That's how far back they go. It's like 1997 at their formation.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised how early they had formed, thinking about what acts were around in 97, that was popular. But then hearing, somebody like Showbread was, kicking around and starting up is kind of interesting.
Well, you guys told me the stories about how they were on tour. You had 8 or 9 guys on stage at once, but then it was the stage at the Creepy Crawl here in St. Louis back when that was still a tiny little hole in the wall, so how the hell is that going to work? But it was not that simple. It was complete, out of control, insane behavior, which years later, getting to watch some of their DVDs and their behind-the-scenes type things, I completely believe that. These guys were having a good time, and they were just out of their minds while they did it for Jesus.
Basically, yeah. The first time I saw Showbread was in Cornerstone. I think it was Cornerstone 2004. It was like right before No Sir, Nihilism is Not Practical had come out. And I'd only heard of the band via an old album review for their previous record, Life Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts, on it. I think it was godcore.com.
Wow, that's going back.
I remember that site.
Yeah, so I had heard the band name at least, and so I thought, well, okay, I'll check out Showbread. And there actually really weren't that many people in the tent. I think there was only maybe 20, 25 people there watching them. And then they went back and played again like a day later on one of the bigger stages, and they got a much better crowd reaction. Like, word had kind of spread throughout the festival that there was this crazy band that had 7 dudes up on stage all at once, and they were all wearing tight red pants and black T-shirts that all had a music note on them with a no smoking sign over it. And we're like, is this band anti-music, or what is the deal with Showbread? And they have definitely taken a lot of weird turns throughout their career, and I guess we'll just have to hop into it. But I will have to make a little bit of a disclaimer on this episode. Back in 1998, they had released an album called The Dissonance of Discontent, and then in 1999, they released another one called Goodbye Is Forever. I don't know how to get those albums. They were not on YouTube. There were not digital versions for me to find. Hell, I'm never going to find the CDs, so who even knows if they were even CDs or on CDRs or what they were.
I went dumpster diving on the internet, and I couldn't find anything anywwant
Yeah, I mean, I went to all the dark places on the internet to find them, and I couldn't find anything. So I just want to say that yes, those records exist. We would talk about them if we could listen to them, but unfortunately we cannot. So we are going to start this discussion with their most well-known first album, which was Life Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts in 2003.
So when I popped this on, I was actually surprised at how good of a quality that it had. Because I mean, you think about, like, there's some tracks on there that ended up getting rewritten and re-recorded on No Sir. So you think about, like, the fact that, okay, this is, I don't know if it was independent or not, but typically an album like that before a major label debut doesn't have that great a quality. It's like, okay, I can see where they're going, but for the most part, they sounded like Showbread, and it was actually nice to listen to. Sure, it didn't have some of the punchiness that, like, a better recording studio would give them, but it was good to listen to.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because if you've never heard Showbread or tried to understand the type of sound we're talking about, their music is very firmly rooted in punk rock. It's very fast, in your face. It's kind of, I kind of get like a little bit of like a Blood Brothers Refused type of sound out of them. Or even maybe later, Self-Minded is what I hear out of Showbread. And there was also another punk band called Soapbox back in the day that I kind of always reminded me of Showbread. But they play punk rock, and it's a lot of people described them as a hardcore band back then. But I think that was just because the vocals were mostly screamed, at least in the early days. So like on Life Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts, probably the most screaming that you'll hear on a Showbread record.
Do we have two vocalists at this point?
We do.
So you've had two guys taking turns with the screaming, as opposed to what we'll get in just under a year, where one is kind of doing the screaming and the other is doing the more melodic presentation. He's not singing on that record, but Live Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts, I heard this much later. I think I heard this after listening to Anorexia Nervosa.
Yeah, same here.
To me, it just sounds like a younger, less focused Showbread. What does that usually translate to? That translates to a band that sounded like this on stage. That would have been just fine with me.
I think the only complaint that I could really suss out with the record was just that the songwriting felt like they were trying to do a similar song in a lot of places. Now, I listen to a lot of my stuff in the background because I'm programming, and so stuff has to kind of jump out at me and get my attention sometimes. But I just remember hearing a lot of the they play hard, they get soft to do the twinkly thing, and then try to make that like epic, bridge or ending a bunch on this album, instead of kind of reserving that for maybe the last song or, spreading it out a little bit. I just remember jarring myself out of, my consciousness and hearing a lot of similar-ish sounding songs in their structure.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely had kind of more of a formula here, even though like on the first listen, you're like, this is just craziness all thrown together in kind of a blender. But it really is that they start off like fast punk rock, scream, 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 scream. Both vocalists are screaming. And one of the weird things about Showbread is that they're two screamers, which is Josh Dice, their main singer, and then you've got Ivory Mobley or Mobley. It's probably Mobley. And Ivory and Josh Dice, basically their scream sounds like the same.
Yeah.
And so it's funny that you have two screamers on the tracks that all basically sound the same. And so you don't really need the second screamer, but it does add to the intensity of the songs because sometimes the vocals get to be like very rapid fire, and you can tell that there's got to be two guys doing it because one, it would basically be like humanly impossible.
It's the Death Stars effect. You can double the vocals in the studio, but you can't do it live. So does the vocalist have that much power? Definitely in this case, because we just got two guys to do the vocals, so we're getting the doubled vocal live.
Yeah, because if you're gonna do double vocals, especially if it's like rapid fire, I would rather see two vocalists do that. Because then, you as a person, in the shower, you want to sing along, whatever. Because we all know you're screaming in the shower. Come on.
Buddy's screaming in the shower. Everybody's like, oh my God, are you okay? And he's like, ah! It's awesome.
I'm just listening to Showbread. It's fine, guys.
Leave me alone. I locked the door for a reason. God.
You want to scream along to that, but, you hear that when it's one singer and it's obviously a studio trick because they have to take a breath. But if it's two singers, then, it's like, all right, you see what's going on, and, maybe while you're doing it, you pick a side or something. Like, it's I like knowing that you're going to go see them do a show and you're going to see that live, and they're not going to struggle with that or have to resort to something else to make that happen.
For the same reason, I definitely want to meet the band and ask them, was this a conscious decision, or was this, we started as a praise and worship band, so we had 7 guys that showed up, and it just happened to be a side effect? Because I don't know anybody that's ever hired 2 vocalists, because now we can do the studio tricks live.
Well, it adds a little bit more of intricacy to the songwriting whenever you're thinking that, basically 2 vocal parts are being written for each song. And that does make it a little bit more complex, although with them sounding basically the same, that might be a little bit lost when you're listening to it. Like, you don't really hear it as well as you're going to hear it on later releases. And Light Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts is cool. I think Your Friends Are Fake and I Am a Machine Gun are like the best songs on that record. And
yeah, Your Friends Are Fake was the first one that made me jump out, and I had to replay that one.
Yeah, it was a good record, and definitely a good start for Showbread. And I can totally understand that they were signed to Tooth and Nail Solid State pretty quickly after putting this out. Just because of the strength of it, how good it sounded, and how many units they probably sold just on their own. Because they did have the strength of 2 other releases before it, and I wish I could comment on those, but unfortunately I can't. So we're going to have to just move on to No Sir, Nihilism is Not Practical.
2004.
Which was most people's
I'm going to start this
Showbread.
one with Dead by Dawn.
So many keyboards. I love it.
I love this record. I get the same feeling listening to this that I do when I listen to the old Cake albums. They are so devoid of studio tricks, you cannot help but sit back and enjoy the music because the people that are playing it can actually play it. There is little to no reverb on this. The guitars are not very distorted. In fact, they're very clean, almost in a joking manner. The guitar is present. We got the layered vocals. This is just a punk rock infused rock album that many people called hardcore because screaming vocalist. There are many things. Thank you, Dan. There are many popular terms that got thrown on Showbread, and I'm going to let them go for now. But part of the problem was we didn't know what to call it. They called it raw rock.
Yeah, which kind of stuck because that's a fun term to just throw out there because you say that and people are like, what is that even? And then you just have to show them Dead by Dawn. Yeah. This album is so much catchier than their previous album. It's hard to hear this album and then not be hearing some of these bridges and choruses later, when you're just not even listening to it. It just pops into your head. I know for me, like, we're all gonna gush about Dead by Dawn because that's kind of what made me revisit Evil Dead because I wrote that movie off a long time ago because my dad scared me with it when I was like 10 years old.
It's all about Mouth is Like a Magazine, dude.
Well, yeah, Mouth Like a Magazine was probably what really put them on the map as far as being a popular band. I mean, this is 2004. The sing scream stuff that was really popular at the time, this really fit in nicely with that. And I have to kind of support Joe's Cake comparison in that this is a very dry sounding record. It's literally what it sounds like. There's not a lot of effects put on anything, or any effects put on anything.
It's skillfully dry. The person or people, I believe it was 2 people that engineered this and produced it, very consciously decided this is what it was going to sound like.
Yeah, and I feel like they also reserved their writing chops a little bit because I don't feel like every track was trying to be epic. There's just this great mix of straight up like rock songs, that just get caught in your head, and then some of the epic stuff like Stabbing Art to Death, and everything. And all the soft songs that are on here are so much catchier than the previous albums. I don't remember if there were any soft songs on the previous album now that I mention it, but just this whole album is just stuck in your head constantly.
Yeah, it's definitely has a lot more hooks to it, and the choruses are good. Everything hits really well. The clean vocals also sound dry in the sense that, like, Josh Dies is not like a over the top melodic singer. Like, he can sing melodically, but it's not, it just sounds like a dude singing. It doesn't sound like some virtuoso is up there. You know, it's not like a Howard Jones, like, really over-the-top operatic vocal. And that's not me saying that Josh Dies is a bad singer. He's not a bad singer. It's just that the way he sings fits the album so well, in that the guitar tone sounds like the vocals, and the screamed vocals are the main attraction here. Because now you've got a little bit more separation between Josh and Ivory, and so they are trading off. And Josh Dies is doing the singing vocals, and Ivory's doing screams, and sometimes backups. What I think is the most interesting about this combination is that they don't do the sing-scream thing like a lot of the other bands were doing it, where they would just like either scream the chorus or do a chorus with some screams to back it up. Like, it's all very intentional the way it's put together, but it's not formulaic at all.
Yeah, every song has a very distinct feeling to it, and you know when it starts which one you're listening to. It's very clear. One that gets stuck in my head a lot is Mathias Replaces Judas, which I still think is their best soft material that they've ever written. That one just is hard to top.
That one's got the cheesy pop punk sound that was very popular in 2004. It's not a bad thing.
It all works.
That is the most important thing. It all works. Everything that I want to make fun of or I want to compare to something else, I can do that cosmetically, but at the end of the day, is this a good record? Yes, because you can sit down, you can put it on, and when it's over, you want to listen to it again. There's no skipping tracks. Everything is very intentional, very well thought out, and it all fits together.
Well, with the Mathias Replaces Judas, I mean, when I was talking about Josh Dies not having a very, like, over-the-top virtuoso vocal, so what do? Halfway through that song, they pull in Reese Roper from Five Iron Frenzy, and he does all the over-the-top virtuoso singing.
Yeah, they do.
And this is not the last time we're going to hear Reese Roper on a Showbread album, and to a point where he's almost, in my opinion, almost integral to the sound. Whenever they're going to do a slow song like this, Reese Roper just adds so much to it. And it's completely over the top and almost doesn't fit, but it works because they only do it once. And that's what I like about it, is that it's perfectly timed, and then they end it off with a banger with the bell jar, just so that you don't get too comfortable, because they could have ended the album easily with Mathias Replaces Judas, but I like the fact that the bell jar is there at the end.
This album could have ended 3 or 4 times before you even got here. It had very well thought out structure. It could have had a different track listing, and it still would have ended well.
It's a hell of a debut. I mean,
Yeah.
It really is. As far as like being a label debut, I know technically Life Kisses and Other Wasted Efforts is kind of a debut, or the other albums that we didn't talk about could have been a debut, but this is just... we're listening to Mathias Replaces Judas, and Reese Roper, he just sounds so fucking good. I can't get over it. Which is funny because I don't really hear Reese Roper sing like that in his other bands.
No, you do not.
No, and that's what's so interesting about it, that he would come out and do this insane over-the-top performance.
He has some epic moments in Five Iron, especially on the newer album.
Totally. And we're probably never going to do a Five Iron Frenzy episode, so unless I get like really sick. So, don't look out for that.
Let me write that down now. If Dan is sick, don't reschedule. Talk about Five Iron Frenzy.
You guys, you assholes can do whatever you want, but yeah, Dead by Dawn, so cool. The lyrics are really clever on this record too. With Dead by Dawn obviously being about Evil Dead 2, and just these corpses cover me with kisses, so just maybe I'll cover this cabin with their blood. Hail to the king, baby! Like, it's just so cool.
And then that bridge.
Oh my god, dude, it's so cool. And it's funny because, like, I'm a guy that spends most of my time listening to heavy shit, and this doesn't really check that box, but I don't care. Like, lines like that and bridges like that, where like there's just this rule of cool throughout the whole record.
Yeah.
And it's trendy, kind of, maybe in 2004, but I didn't see it that way. I thought this was one of the most unique records that came out that year, and that was a very monumental year.
No, sir, Nihilism is Not Practical is an album that you need to buy if you don't have it. We said that in Patreon. we're saying it again today. 2006, Age of Reptiles. It's Buddy's favorite pastime, naked lunch.
I mean, that's a daily occurrence, so, you know. I don't understand how they go from No Sir to Age of Reptiles. There's some good songs on it. You know, I liked I don't even know how you say it. Emetophobia, George Romero, and the Jesus Lizard. But even still, like the fact that the George Romero song on there was just like, okay, we did Dead by Dawn, so let's do another zombie song, is what that kind of feels like to me. But
now would be a good time to talk about how much shit this band got because of their lifestyle when they were supposed to be a Christian band. I remember the big controversy with Dead by Dawn because somebody made a video in tribute to the song using clips from the movie, put it online, and all of a sudden Showbread is anti-God because somebody else cut a video together and used their song. I think these are just guys that liked zombie movies, as most of us do. And in 2006, that was the tail end of the you're not a Christian band if you do XYZ.
Oh, dude, there's no tail end for that. It's still very much that way today.
Still going on.
Unfortunately, I actually got an email from on the Brutally Speaking email. It was mostly an email for John, but it was from Jeremy Prince, one of our listeners, talking about he's like, yeah, Dan always downplays the effect of like cursing and things like that in music or in Christian music and how that affects fans. And he's partially right. I do kind of undersell it because it's not really like a problem for me. But it is actually, you know, like when I read that email, I kind of really started thinking about that like, you know, there are definitely a lot of Christian fans out there that have certain expectations of bands that are just kind of bananas when you really think about it. And I'm not going to lie, like I used to be that way. I used to be like, open up the lyric book, see if they all thank God. If they don't all thank God, as long as the lead singer thanks God, I guess it's okay. But like it's always been one of those weird things. And I just wanted to highlight that yeah, I probably undersell it because I kind of use it on my own, you know, from my own perspective, which is just kind of, at this point, it's kind of just anything goes. If I like the music, then it's fine. But I think that in the case of Showbread, it was largely unwarranted because I know they were big into being pacifists, and that's going to continue in their lyrical career from here on out. But like, I don't remember Showbread ever doing anything like blatantly like that was pushing the line. I would have kind of considered Showbread to be one of the safer bands in that regard. I know they got the controversy from the Dead by Dawn video, but like they didn't even make that video.
Yeah,
like somebody
I'd agree
else
with the safe thing a little bit until Anorexia Nervosa. I mean, that's jumping the gun a little bit, but they definitely get into some crazy territory with that, which is very interesting. But you know, that's for the next section here.
Right. So yeah, we got to talk about Age of Reptiles. Yeah.
Yeah, Age of Reptiles itself, I just feel like was
kind of the same thing,
safe,
but not as good.
Yeah, it was slower. There nearly wasn't very much screaming at all comparatively to their previous material, which, you know, being a meathead, you know, that's kind of doesn't check the box for me. So by the time I'm done with it, I just felt like I wanted more, and so I just wanted to re-listen to No Sir again.
Are we down to one vocalist now?
No, Ivory was still in the band for Age of Reptiles.
It was Anorexia Nervosa, where Josh Dyes wrote everything and came up with the concept for that,
I mean,
right?
he wrote everything on No Sir and on Age of Reptiles. But I think, without revealing too much of like how shallow I can be sometimes as a music fan,
ladies and gentlemen, unplaceable metal fan.
Let's do it.
It's just that, you know, yeah, I mean, I heard this record and I was like, where's all the screaming? Like, it is there, kind of. Like, they do scream sometimes. But this record it's a rock record. And I totally understand why they did this in 2006. No band in 2004. Like, if you look at the tags that No Sir gets, you know, everybody says that No Sir Nihilism is not practical is like, here's some of the labels that it got. Emo, hardcore punk, and screamo. In 2004, bands did not want to be labeled like that.
That's true.
You know, nobody wanted to be called emo because the whole emo thing was, you know, and again, without getting into what emo actually is versus what the general public perception of emo was, no band wanted to be part of that, like, emo movement or whatever it was that took place in the early 2000s. It wasn't really emo, but whatever.
It was became pop music that everybody listened to and thought they were so cool. Under Oath ripped it off because, hey, we like those bands. I maintain the only reason it was popular is because Blink-182 didn't put out a record that year. Showbread was not that, but there were qualities to their music that were often accused of that. That was not why Showbread did what they did. They just had their own unique sound.
I think they wanted to show people that there was more to Showbread than just screaming and crazy synth parts. You know, like, I totally understand why they did this. Unfortunately, that doesn't make me enjoy the record anymore. But as a music critic, I will say there are definitely some really good songs on this record. Packless Cephalosaurus, if you don't get up and dance whenever you hear that song, like, you're dead. You know, it is incredibly energetic and fun and dancey and poppy and all that good shit. Imitophobia. Yeah, I'm really good at reading.
That one does get stuck in my head a lot.
That one's really good. George Romero Will Be at Our Wedding's really good. And I even like the epic ending track, Age of Reptiles, which then goes into the hidden track, Age of Insects. And the song Age of Insects is actually very emotional. Like, I get a little shook up whenever I listen to that song. And so did they put out a bad album? No. This is not a bad album. Like, objectively speaking, Age of Reptiles is a great album. It's well put together. There's a lot of thought put into the songs. It's cool hearing Josh and Ivory do lead vocals together that aren't always screamed. You know, like, it shows that they've got more to them. It shows that they can write a hook and they can support it and it'll get stuck in your head. Like, that's the thing about this record, is these songs will get stuck in your head. But if you're a guy that listens to bands like Zayo or, you know, stuff like that, you're looking for something heavy. And I guess it's one of those things that, like, No Sir, Nihilism Is Not Practical got through your filter because it was heavy enough.
Yeah.
To get you into it. Like, I'm not out there trying to say that Showbread's the heaviest band in the world or that they have ever been or that they once were and aren't now. Musically, this sounds like business as usual.
And this
Showbread
was 9 years of, we are about energy. The band that you're going to see is going to get you moving by moving. 7 guys on stage are going to go batshit insane, and you're going to have a good time. That's kind of what their sound was based on, was the energy of the song, not how heavy it was necessarily.
Right, and I don't even think on No Sir the goal was to be heavy. I really don't. I think it was just a result of that energy.
We get to be the ignorant fans, though. We didn't know at the time that the band had been around for 7 years. We just heard No Sir, Nihilism Is Not Practical and thought, this is the first album this band has put together. It's on a major label, so it's the first release, right? No, it wasn't.
Well, and this actually charted.
Absolutely it did.
Like, on the Billboard 200. I mean, it came in at 198, but, I mean, that ain't bad for a band like this.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Like I said, the songs are good. They stand on their own. It's a great album, but it's not the kind of album that a heavy music fan is going to like.
The music isn't necessarily, like, less complex or anything comparatively to No Sir. It's just the overall sound is less interesting to my own ears.
Yeah, and that's the great dichotomy that I deal with doing this show, is that just because it's not my preference doesn't make it bad, but it's still not my preference. So it's like, if I have to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, you know, I'm going to give it a thumbs down. But I have to acknowledge that it was still a good record. A lot of really good thought went into it, and the band did a great job. It just wasn't what fans were wanting, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Do you think fans wanted Anorexia Nervosa?
Well, you know...
What the fuck? I say that in jest.
For sure.
Dan calls me and says, there's a new album by Showbread. It's called Anorexia, and it's the first half of a concept that's going to be called Anorexia Nervosa. The other record's going to come out in a couple months, and it's like straight industrial. You have to sit in a dark room with a lamp and read the book, which at the time Dan was way on the kick of, you got to read the lyrics. This wasn't just lyrics, this was the story. You had to read while you were listening to the record, so it would put you in the mindset of what the album was trying to tell you.
Well, I'm going to correct you on a couple of things.
Please do, because I'm not done yet.
The first thing is that these were released simultaneously. Nervosa and Anorexia came out on the same day, 2 CD collection. I bought them the same day, because back in the day you could buy, in 2008 at least, you could buy Solid State and Tooth and Nail records for like $9.99 each, so I paid the $20. I got both albums. And the actual lyrics to the songs are not printed in the booklet. All that's printed is the story. And there's timestamps. So like you're listening to a song and they're like, okay, when you get to 1 minute and 33 seconds, you will read this passage while the music is going along with it. And I did that. And I just think that it was really fucking pretentious.
We're going with pretentious, are we?
Even back in 2008, we're talking 12 years ago, I was like, this is some pretentious bullshit.
That's so funny because I had the opposite opinion of that. I loved the whole, sitting down, consuming the album, and having this thing that I'm reading that is supposed to be complemented by the music, which I don't know if I want to say it yet, but, the fact that I feel like the focus was so much on the story and how you were supposed to consume this album that became more of the focus than the actual music.
My first and only reaction when he told me this story was, so this is everything Tool has been trying to do for the past 10 years. Their whole thing has been, you're supposed to feel the music. It's not about the musicians. It's about the show and the presentation, and you have to see us live so that you can see the visuals on the screen. Showbread just puts a couple records together, gives you the story, and says, when you get to this point, read this. Now, I must ask the question, did it work?
I think back then, yes, it worked. I think it worked if you bought the albums and you sat down and read through it like you're supposed to. Because nobody did that. So it was interesting because it was something different. And so that, I think, also captured people's attention, especially because there's this Christian band and they're talking about some really deep, dark stuff throughout the entire, both albums. And so I think just the entire package was just intriguing to a lot of people.
Did it work for you?
Yeah.
You sat down, read it, and said, okay, I get it. I feel what they're trying to make me feel. That worked for you.
Yeah.
What about you, Dan?
It mostly worked for me. One of the things that I was irritated about was that you have to read at certain times. And I just felt like that was kind of cheesy. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I felt like, why can't I just read the story and that be the story? And I was also upset that the lyrics weren't printed in the booklet. I had to go to an external website in order to read the lyrics. So it was one of those things where it's like, I know you guys are telling a story, but I'm more concerned with what you're actually saying than all of this kind of side bullshit. Because I don't have time. Like, at that time, I'm, working 40 hours a week, and granted, it's so weird thinking that I didn't have time back before I had 4 kids. But like, I didn't feel at that time that I had time to sit down and listen to this. And I had no problem with the music. I loved the music, but the story just seemed kind of like, well, let's get into the story for a second, because I have to explain that to fully explain how I feel. So the story is that you have 2 sisters, right? One sister, which is Anorexia, she is the pure sister, the sister that follows all the rules, tries to be holy, and tries to reach heaven by herself. And then on the flip side of that, you have Nervosa, who is the sister that is basically evil, or basically is trying to experience all the things that the world has to offer her, whether they be good or whether they be bad. And I won't give the entire thing away. I think the story is at least good enough for people to experience on their own. However, there are things in the story, like every now and again you're reading in the booklet and there's like a letter that's in red. And so, of course, you get out a pen and paper and you write down all the red letters and you try to unscramble them, and then there's a message about Jesus, like in both of the albums. And I just felt like if the message is Jesus, the idea is Jesus, everybody needs to come to Jesus. So anorexia, the person that thinks they can get to heaven on their own, they can't, they need Jesus. And then Nervosa is so incredibly lost that she also needs Jesus. So the message is that you need Jesus. I don't feel like to convey the message that you need Jesus requires 2 fucking albums and a story to go along with each album.
And a scavenger hunt. Like, it was just too much. And again, I think a lot of that was that I was already a Christian. So, like, I already know the Jesus message, and I've heard Showbread tell me about the Jesus message on 2 albums or 3 albums, depending on how you want to look at it, already. I felt like it was just too much. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I just didn't appreciate the art. I didn't appreciate that they were just trying to paint a really big picture. How it came across to me was that it was just an overcomplication of a very simple message.
So, is that how you felt then? Do you feel differently now, like 10 years later?
Yes, I do. So that is how I felt at the time, because I was very, very involved, like in my church and stuff like that at the time. When I listen to it now, I can kind of see how this could be fun. To sit down and read a story and get an idea about 2 different sides of the coin, because I think the interesting thing about anorexia and nervosa is that we all as humans will choose a certain path. Some people will choose the path of righteousness, and some people will choose the path of sin, right? This is getting really deep for this podcast, but I think that it is very interesting that it does encompass all of humanity to a degree. Although my wife did point out whenever these albums came out, she said, well, isn't everybody a little bit of both of these characters? And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. That, you know, there's not necessarily a person out there that's totally like anorexia and totally like nervosa. But I think that the message that they're trying to deliver, I think it's clever how they did it, in that, you know, one album is going to appeal to a certain group of people, and then one album is not going to appeal to a certain group of people.
There's a third option. Some people choose the path of the carnival.
I'm not gonna. No, I'm not.
Because that was the whole point, right?
You piece of shit! Don't
Sarcasm
ever bring that up again.
Deep with this one.
Don't ever bring that up again. This is sacred ground we're walking on here. As an adult, I appreciate the art a lot more than I did whenever I was younger. Because when I was younger, I'm like, you know, I know everything already, which is kind of incorporated into this story as well. So it's kind of a gotcha. You know, they got me.
So I think for me, like, I was really into it when it first came out, because I read along with the story, and, you know, so then when I listen to it, like, I can replay a lot of, like, what I'm being told, and, you know, the feelings that I had while going through it the first time. And then I haven't listened to these albums in, like, I don't know, maybe 8 years or something. Like, it's been a long time since I listened to them. And so I just remember that there was a story, but I don't remember anything about it. So I pop them in again, and I don't like them anymore. I think that without the story, these albums just don't work. There's some good songs that are catchy-ish, you know, with some epic moments, but without the painted pictures that were happening in those stories, I don't feel like, for the casual listener, these are fun albums to listen to.
I would say they both succeed 100% in the music department, because there's a reason we sit down. I would say they both succeed musically. You can listen to them beginning to end and will be entertained by the music. Unfortunately, I don't really know what the lyrics and the vocals are trying to tell me. I just know that I'm getting the Showbread presentation when I'm listening to this. I put one of these on a couple weeks ago. I think it was Anorexia, because I was sitting in traffic and I was tired of listening to different songs by different bands, and Showbread was on the schedule. Dropped Anorexia on, listened to it front to back. It was good, but it was good the same way that Nine Inch Nails is good sometimes. I don't always want to sit and listen to the atmosphere that Trent Reznor is going to create for the next hour and a half, but sometimes I do want to do that. Sometimes I will sit down and listen to Ghosts, even though there's no lyrics, and it's all about how many loops did Trent Reznor have this week. Anorexia Nervosa, they succeed the same way. They present a feeling and an atmosphere, it's just not clearly stated unless you're following along with the story. And that is not enough for most people.
Yeah, because that's without the story. That's where I think I disagree a little bit. Is that I don't think that without the story, the atmosphere comes across enough. Because I feel like there's a lot of interludes, musically, that it's because you're supposed to be reading along with this thing, and they're presenting a feeling to you, and it's being accentuated by the music that's going on. And so without that story, it's just kind of, okay, what are we doing here?
Well, the message is totally lost. You're correct.
Yeah. And so I don't know, because I listened to Anorexia all the way through, and I went, I remember enjoying this way more a long time ago. I don't understand why I don't like this anymore. And I went back and I found that story, and I kind of reread through a couple of tracks again with it, and I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense again, because then I gained my understanding again of like what those parts of different songs were, what was happening in those different pieces of songs, and that helped bring the story back to the to the main picture.
I still like the music, and I like it because it doesn't sound like Age of Reptiles. Like, if we want to be purely cosmetic about this is the Showbread record that we all wanted after hearing Age of Reptiles.
Oh, that's definitely for sure.
We wanted to hear more screaming. Now, one notable thing that we haven't said, Ivory is gone on this record, so we only have Josh Dies on the vocal department. Although Ivory does make an appearance.
It must have been working on the record before he decided to leave.
Well, on Anorexia, the end, track 10 features Ivory. And then on Nervosa, I don't remember if he was on Nervosa or not. Yeah, Ivory is on the GOAT in Nervosa as well. And
that's because he's the greatest of all time.
Of course. Right? Yeah, the GOAT. Yeah, that's funny. But he is also, so he's on both records on one track at least, so you have that. But for the most part, it's just Josh Dies doing a Nine Inch Nails thing.
Yeah, the industrial was very strong with this one.
It wasn't just industrial; it was like straight up worship of Nine Inch Nails. Like, I'm just gonna say it. It's been years, and I'm just gonna throw it out there that I feel like this record, or both of these records, was him just trying to be Trent Reznor. Obviously, he was a huge fan.
He did the best he could.
Yeah, and
well, I mean, I think it was at this time he had that side project called Josh Dies, and he had the album Aesthetics of Violence.
Yeah, I've got that.
I got that too, because we went to Joplin to see them do some of the Anorexia Nervosa material.
Well, we actually went to Joplin to see Living Sacrifice.
Yes, but
the night
Showbread was the
before.
next night.
Let's be real.
We stayed an extra day.
Yeah, we saw Living
not?
Sacrifice and Demon Hunter and Advent and The Famine, and it was excellent. And then, Showbread happened to be playing the next day, so we just got a hotel room, and the rest is history. You know what was really great about that show, too? So this record had a lot of visual flair to it as well, with the videos that they released, because whenever you went and saw the band play live, they would have a projector up, and they would be playing the videos to all the sound clips. And there was actually a lot of video that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, it was like a whole stage production, basically.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
I think at that time we were really very much into the whole production side of it. Like, the band really put their best foot forward, and I can't imagine how much money that must have cost. But I know that they were never like a huge band.
Yeah.
And so this may have definitely taken the cake as far as a production from an underground band. This was incredible. There are some notable tracks on these records. Anorexia, I really, really love The Flies, which is an instrumental track. And I just like the way that it builds and builds and builds and has a very unsettling feeling. And whenever we were watching them play in Joplin, they had on the projector, they had a scene from the Amityville Horror, the 70s one, where the priest walks into the room, and as he's looking around, the room just starts filling up with flies. And I'll never get that. I'll never get that visual image out of my head. You know that.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I can't ever listen to the song without thinking about it. But to me, the highlight of this record is the song "The Goat." This is Anorexia's version of "The Goat," and it is. I just love that industrial beat. I'm not doing it justice, but if you can hear it in the background, then great. But I love his.
Just want to take that song now and put your rendition in there and see if it sounds the same.
Yeah, it's perfect, and I love Josh Dye's vocal delivery on this song and how melodic it gets. And there's a quote I believe from Aliens at the end of it, and it's fucking great, man. Like it really is.
Of the two albums, Anorexia was definitely my favorite because I much preferred that dark overtone with the atmosphere that it was creating. And just from just on a purely like, I don't know what kind of like trying to say here, but just from like, I guess a personal, preference kind of thing, it's presenting themes that I could see myself becoming susceptible to. So I relate to Anorexia a little bit more in like that type of atmosphere, that type of aspect. But whereas Nervosa, I'm not going to strip clubs on the weekend, whatever. That's not something I find myself falling into or potentially falling into. I just didn't relate on that level as closely to Nervosa. And I also just wasn't as much of a fan of just the overall music and sound that Nervosa was presenting. But because I definitely preferred the industrial darkness that Anorexia had.
Well, I think that the Goat is a highlight for me, although I do prefer I do prefer Nervosa over Anorexia. And we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about some of the imagery on this record. When we were talking earlier about Showbread being kind of a safe band, there is so much reference to sex and violence and hatred in these lyrics. The pig really stands out to me, where at the end of it, in the story, it says that like the pig like basically has broken legs and like falls on its back and is defecating from its mouth and eyes. Like, holy fuck. Like that is I can't even imagine that. Like that is insane imagery and is very unsettling. But what's equally unsettling is where Buddy will relate more to Anorexia, I more relate to Nervosa, and that I'm me, guys. I'm a foul-mouthed, beer-drinking so-and-so. So of course I'm going to relate to this record a little bit more. And so Buddy's the good, I'm the evil, right? But I think I feel like Nervosa just had stronger songs. The Journey is insane. Like it is such a stronger open on Nervosa than it is on Anorexia, which Anorexia starts off slow. Nervosa starts off full speed ahead. Like it sounds like you're on a roller coaster. On that song. I mean, it hits you so hard and so fast. The energy is just insane. And I will admit that like the Vulture, the Sky, and the Dirt definitely kind of slow things down a little bit. But Nervosa, unlike Anorexia, so Anorexia was trying to be like bright but with like a dark undertone, whereas Nervosa is just a dingy fucking slow dirge of a record, and it is like just filled with filth. Talking about some of the imagery on this. So Nervosa actually basically goes to work at a strip club And it's not just a strip club. It's a strip club in a slaughterhouse. So, like, you can look in one direction and see, you know, women dancing on poles, and then look in another direction and see fucking cows getting their skulls crushed in with hammers.
This sounds like the premise for a Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez double feature.
I mean, let's do it. You know, like, this is fucked up on so many levels. And this is where Showbread really isn't such a safe band, although I don't remember them getting as much shit about this.
I don't think anybody really paid attention. And that's a problem, because the things that they did complain about were not even remotely close to what these records had.
This is insane. I mean, like, she's giving a guy a lap dance, basically, and she gets raped, and then becomes pregnant, and then gets a really seedy abortion, like from a pickup truck abortion guy. You know, like, it's messed up.
I mean, yeah, what made it hard for me this time around was like the fact that, you know, in The Flies in Nervosa, which is where the rape happens, they have her, screaming throughout like a minute of that section, and then her crying at the end. Like, I'm like, you know, and then with the death, when the abortion happens, you know, the kid cries at the end, and the way the story sounds like, you know, what is the kid an orphan now? You know, what's going on? You know, what is happening here? And I don't want to listen to that shit for entertainment. Like,
yeah, it's really dark.
I can't.
It's really dark.
Yeah.
And
because as music, you know, just music, like I can't put that on. Like, I just can't do that.
Well, you don't want to drive to church in the morning with the kids.
With that intention, you know, yeah. It's like, I got 2 kids now. I don't care to hear that. You know, if I'm consuming the story to be consuming the story and trying to understand what's going on there, then sure, okay, I can go through it. But just to be like, oh, I'm bored, I'm gonna put on Nervosa, you know, and then hit those 2 tracks, like, that's like, I'm bored, I guess I'm gonna watch Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, well, the goat is also really good on this one too. It's like a really full speed ahead song. It's got Ivory on it, and they're just screaming "No future, no future, no future" for anyone.
Oh, that one's good. Yeah,
it's a banger, and I love that track. But I got to make special mention for the beginning, which is the end of the album, because look at how fucking clever we are. And but the beginning on Nervosa, you know, is a slower, kind of more positive sounding song, like kind of the only positive moment on the record. And of course, Reese Roper swings in and delivers, you know, what can only be called a spellbinding performance. He's fantastic, and I just love it. And I mean, that's it. That's Anorexia Nervosa, man. It's a big pill to swallow. It's so out of the realm of what we've dealt with Showbread. Like,
it's very different.
Came out of nowhere, man. I never expected anything like that. And we've talked about it a lot, but it definitely isn't my favorite, because it's not a record that like I go to like feel good, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think it was a miss or anything, but it's definitely a big pill to swallow, and you kind of have to know what you're getting into before you go into it.
2009, The Fear of God. It's finally been put into you.
Yeah, this was only 1 year after Anorexia Nervosa, which is pretty crazy considering they wrote 2 albums and then immediately wrote this one.
What's funny about this record is it sounds like a Showbread album. Anorexia Nervosa, like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. So it's like
it doesn't even sound like the same band.
You had like 3 albums that were, you know, Anorexia Nervosa, Age Reptiles, that were like, that's kind of Showbread, I guess. And then Fear of God comes back in with, you know, that No Sir sound, which was definitely fun for me.
Thank you, Sylvia Massey.
Yep.
Yeah, she produced. She produced No Sir and Age of Reptiles.
So it definitely feels like he worked on Anorexia Nervosa by himself. Sounds like that was a Josh Dice thing. But The Fear of God was the next album by Showbread, so...
Well, it's all a Josh Dice thing. I mean, he wrote pretty much everything.
Yeah. That's a great intro, though, with The Fear of God, where it says, "May Raw Rock kill you forever and ever, amen."
This was more of a... I think this was more of like okay, guys, we definitely took you on a weird journey on those last records. So now we're going to kind of come back to what you want. And this is a little bit more like No Sir, but it's actually more like Age of Reptiles. Like it's like a mixture of those two albums.
Yeah, because it's not quite as heavy in areas like No Sir was, but there's definitely a lot more, screaming and intensity than Age of Reptiles had. But yeah, outside of a couple of tracks, it was just okay. It was a good, solid record, but nothing really like jumped out and was like as close, as catchy as anything that was on No Sir.
A couple of tracks I really liked were, obviously I loved Let There Be Raw, which
that one
is just raw, rock. Yeah. That was awesome. And very much a nod to old Showbread fans. But then he turns around and writes a song called Shepherd No Sheep, which is a song about how he hates that everybody wants him to scream all the time. And, how he's getting tired of being criticized, which is what we're doing. Sorry about that.
Sorry, dude.
That's what we do. And, he basically says, I hate music because of you. Like, I'm sorry I didn't ask your permission before writing this song or structuring the verse or how to write the lyrics or whether to scream or not to scream. And he basically says, I hate music because of you. Like, you make it really difficult for me. And I definitely feel where he's coming from, like, totally. But this record is definitely, like, I would say probably the safest Showbread record until their last one.
Let's talk about the polarizing fans that existed in hardcore. Yes, this is a punk record, but the fans were the hardcore fans because Showbread is a band that screams. And if you scream, you're over here with the hardcore punk metalcore guys, and that's what you do, and that's all they want to hear because this is 2009. That's the only thing you should ever do. I think Josh Dies is an example of a musician who has a lot of music in his head that doesn't necessarily fall into the picture of generic screamo hardcore. It just happens to be that screaming is a tool he uses to write his music. The general populace, they want all screaming or no screaming most of the time. But the band never did anything that was blatantly trendy. It's not like Showbread put out an emo record or a metalcore album. They just released records. If anything, they put out a random industrial set piece that most people apparently didn't pay attention to.
I think it went over a lot of people's heads. Definitely over mine. But I agree with you that, he's just saying, yeah, I use these tools, but I'm not doing it to sell records. I'm not doing it because that's what you want.
I'm not doing it for you, the fans. Thank you for coming to my show.
Right. Thanks for the $10 per person. I appreciate that. It's hard to keep these projectors going,
I think this is a safe record. I think No Sir is the bar by which Showbread is measured. But if you're a fan of the band, this is just safe. It's another record. It's good enough. It's not great. Not the biggest fan of it.
Yeah.
I remember definitely thinking it was very middle of the road.
Yeah, it had a couple of good songs and everything else kind of, just ran together for me.
And it's not going to get better, guys.
2010. Who can know it?
Who can? I mean, okay, so one thing that has to be known is their deal with Solid State Tooth and Nail had expired at this point, so they moved over to Chad Johnson's label, Come and Live. And Come and Live was a label where they're like, we're going to give all the music away for free as digital download, but if you want the albums like a physical copy, you have to buy it from the band, which was just kind of an attempt in 2010 to kind of understand how the music industry was working and how it was changing. So this was their idea. So I downloaded this on day one because I was, still a pretty big fan of Showbread. And I got to say, guys, I was pretty disappointed. Minus all the stuff that I had said on the last record about how he doesn't do this for me, and I understand that, and he wants to write the music he wants to write, and I understand that. But just because I understand it doesn't mean I have to like it.
That's for sure. I was never more gleefully happy to drag this album into the trash can on my computer.
Well, you felt that strong about it.
Oh, I hated this album so much.
I cannot tell you what is good about this record because it runs together with the last one. I cannot speak for the musicians and the artists of the world who hit a point in their career when they decide to change their sound or their image or their presentation. But as a selfish, ignorant fan, I get to ask the question, why is this a Showbread record and not Josh Dies? Because this sounds like secondhand Me Without You. This doesn't sound like Showbread, not to my ears. Knowing that we have 2 records in a row that kind of run together, it's not looking good.
Well, I mean, this didn't sound anything like Fear of God, honestly. This was like slow, and I mean, I remember when I was going through this and listening to this again, I remember texting Dan, like, if I wanted to listen to contemporary Christian music, I wouldn't put on Showbread.
Yeah, this is...
Reach for the skillet.
This is, like, this makes the Fear of God sound like Master of Puppets, like, in comparison. Like, this is just dreary, boring, slow alt-rock with, like, a little bit of, like, worship band stuff thrown in there. And, you know, I respect Josh Dies. I think he's a great writer. I did not enjoy this. This is not why I listen to music like this. This is not why I listen to punk, even, you know? It's nothing to me. It's nothing complicated, you know, because I can get into a record that's like slower paced. Like if you look at like Opeth's Damnation, like I love that record. It's soft and it's not like, you know, their other material. But this just did not have that same appeal to me. It didn't grab me at all. And I had no emotional attachment to it at all. And I was like, okay, guys, well, hopefully the next one's going to be good.
I couldn't remember, like, because I just remember that I hated 210%. I wanted nothing to do with this record, and I went back and, you know, started trying to find like old reviews for this record, because I don't know, like, okay, was this just me? Was the writing on the wall or something that I just didn't know? And, you know, so I started trying to find some reviews for it, which surprisingly were all very, very well received, I guess. But I read a review that said it was for fans of Showbread's material, like Mathias replaces Judas, which I thought was insane, because none of these songs come even close to being nearly as good as that song. That's like a smack in the face to the quality of Mathias replaces Judas.
I mean, Reese Roper wasn't anywhere on this album.
Yeah.
Would have been a good time for him to be on the record, because Five Iron wasn't around. Are you ready for Cancer?
I mean, nobody's ready for Cancer.
2012. Guys, I need to tell you something. I'm afraid that I'm not me. Maybe I am me, but I'm afraid that I'm not. I'm worried that Dan could be me right now.
I'm not. I'm just me. Thanks for asking.
Anybody want a vintage 70s rock record with some arbitrary screaming thrown in? Because that's kind of what we get.
I actually like Cancer because I just hated the other album so much that I was just willing to take anything at this point.
Anything, guys, please.
This is a weird record, and you know, in pure Showbread fashion, of course, it's a lofty concept record. It's a story about a girl, you know, who, or maybe it's a girl. I don't know. I didn't read too much into it, to be honest with you. But it's basically a concept record that takes place over the course of 4 chapters, and these chapters are basically, you know, the album. It's not as lofty as Anorexia Nervosa, where you have to like sit down and read at certain times, you know. But the concept actually isn't as prevalent in the lyrics as it would be. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention is that this was supposed to be a movie too. Like they actually made a movie to go with it. There wasn't any type of concept that was attached to the lyrics directly, but they made a movie following the 4-chapter story. And I have not seen that movie. And apparently it wasn't released whenever the album was released. It wasn't released until I think the next record came out, actually. Their last record came out the same day as the movie. I think they had a lot of financial problems with getting the movie off the ground. And I know they went through like a whole bunch of directors and stuff, and they were not like a super successful band, like financially. So it was really hard for them to get that off the ground. It took them a while, somewhere close to 4 years, which is kind of disappointing whenever you're going to buy this record or listen to this record, and you could download it for free actually because it was on Come and Live. But you download this or you buy it or whatever, and there's this huge concept, and you're kind of missing it because you can't see the movie until like 2016.
Yeah. And without that, I mean, I didn't really enjoy the record. Sex with Strangers, the second track, was probably the only one that grabbed me as something catchy that I wanted to re-listen to, which I did.
Yeah.
But the rest of it just was meh. Is it done yet? I mean, at the very least, I didn't make sure to thumbs down every track like I did on Who Can Know It. Because every time I finished a track, I would go back, thumbs it down, and skip forward because I never wanted any of those songs to show up in shuffle.
I mean, I don't think that the band is going to care at this point.
Yeah, probably not.
It's better than the last record, but it's not that great.
I'm tuning my recommendations because if I thumbs it down, then the service is never going to recommend that song to me. So I'm making sure that I can scrub Who Can Know It completely from my system.
Just wait until the service runs out of suggestions.
Then it goes, I guess
they come back. Trust me. Then we send emails asking for the double thumbs down because I really don't ever want to hear this again. It's not just a suggestion or a preference anymore. Delete that.
Yeah. But at least Cancer was kind of more of a, I don't know if I'd call it a return to form. I don't think I would go that far. It was
more acceptable.
It was definitely more interesting to listen to.
It's more like The Fear of God and less like Who Can Know It, which is a good thing. I didn't really dig it that much, though, because it was still more rock than punk. I mean, they threw a lot of different genres together, and I feel like this is almost like a bunch of genres in a blender. So it's not like a great cohesive record like it's probably supposed to sound. And I think a lot of that, like maybe it'll all become clear to me if I see the movie, but I don't think it will.
Yeah.
2016, unfortunately, Showbread is show dead.
That's a really clever title, which I really liked.
This sounds like an unmastered afterthought. I don't want to pick on it too much because I don't hate the record, but this sounds like it was recorded by one person who didn't really know what they were doing. It sounds like a batch of demos that might one day become Showbread songs or might even become Josh Dye's ideas. But they don't sound formed. They don't sound as thought out as the other albums do. They also don't run on as bad as Cancer or Who Can Know. So I'm not sure what I'm complaining about at this point.
I'm on the opposite side of the fence with this one because I really liked this record. I felt like this was their way of saying, like, okay, we're gonna break up now, but we're gonna give you the album that you want. So it's much more like No Sir. It's not as good as No Sir because nothing really is, right?
That's the truth.
And like this was cool. There's a lot more screaming and stuff, but at the same time, there's also a little bit of like, do you guys, like, it's almost sarcastic in the sense of like, did you think all we wanted was more screaming? And that's just me being an unpleasable metal fan right now. Like, because obviously I complained for the past hour that that's what I did want. And now that I have it, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But like, I want something like that's deeper. But I mean, how deep is, hey, we're going to quit?
Yeah. I mean, it was an okay album for me. Out of all the albums that they've released, if we count Anorexia Nervosa as being one album, it's probably my second favorite, maybe my third. I don't know. It kind of flips between Anorexia Nervosa and Showbread for me. But I didn't even know this album existed because with Who Can Know It and Cancer, I wrote that band off so hard.
Yeah.
I
could see
I didn't even know this existed. So I've only listened to it about 1.5 times. And I enjoyed it a lot because, I haven't heard Showbread in a long time. the fact that it had that energy like No Sir did. It was like, man, I do kind of wish we had maybe another album of this from them, but this is what we get. It's what we get. And I thought Dear John Piper was probably my favorite off the album.
Yeah, that one was really good. I'm a pretty big fan of My Shadow Was a Bat. I mean, they definitely win with the show titles, or I'm sorry, they definitely win with the song titles, like 100%. Like, Why Shouldn't We Kill Ourselves? And I am horrible at processing rejection. Like, it's very clever in the way that No Sir was, but like it definitely feels a little bit like, man, I feel like this band had so much potential, and I think for the most part they definitely achieved that. But I think they're a little directionless here. And that makes sense because it's their last album and they're basically just saying, yep, here you guys go. It's fine.
Yeah, they're throwing all their ideas in and, trying to sift out the best ones on top.
It's definitely not easy to talk about a record like this objectively because it's like, well, it's just the last thing that they did. And, I can't really say that it's their triumph. But at the same time, it's definitely the record that we all wanted to hear back when we heard Reptiles. So,
yeah.
What do you want? Do you want the thing that do you want the thing that you want, or do you not?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like this. We kind of, as fans, maybe have did it to them because they come out with No Sir, and then we put that on a stick and hold it out in front of them, saying, "Do this again." But they don't necessarily want to, and every time they get close to it, but they still want to do something new, we're like, well, that isn't this. And so we look down upon it. And, that's probably why we got some of the albums that we did, because they're like, well, I'm tired of chasing that, like he said in, that one song that you were talking about before, Dan. And so maybe it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, it's fine. It's a good album. I enjoy it. But
Showbread, it's fine.
Showbread, it's fine, but they're show dead.
Final thoughts on Showbread, Dan.
It's fine. No, what I think about Showbread is that they are a band that was really, really creative, and I think that they're a band that we didn't really deserve, to a certain extent. Like, I think that we did drive them to this. Like, guys like me and Buddy, like, definitely were like, where's the screaming? Because that's what I want. I want your first record forever. And I think that to a certain extent, they never really caught on because they wanted to go in so many creatively pure directions. And I think the fan base just wasn't ready for that. And I don't think that they were able to. I don't think that they supported it maybe the way they should have. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say that I like music that I don't like. So it's kind of a catch-22. I think if you're into punk rock, if you're into rock or alternative rock, you're going to find something to like about Showbread. But I think that if you're a hardcore fan, you're only going to find a couple of like hidden gems here.
Buddy, what about you?
Yeah, I'm in that it's fine camp. I used to like this band a lot more than I do now. And some of that's just age, some of it's where I'm just at in life, that I don't relate to some of the material quite as much anymore. But you can't discount the geniusness of No Sir, Nihilism Is Not Practical. If there's one album that you're going to listen to No Sir and call it a day. You aren't going to have a bad time at all with that record. And there's, even though we crapped out a lot on a couple of these records, there's something for everybody throughout their entire discography. So even though most of their material didn't appeal to me or anybody, on the team here, there's probably something else that might appeal to you.
I believe in Showbread. They set a premise as a highly energetic band that was going to get you out of your seat and make you enjoy the next 45 minutes of your life. They released multiple records that many people talk about to this day. We talk about No Sir. We talk about Age of Reptiles. We talked for a long time about Anorexia Nervosa. I don't think that the misstep at the end is enough to give up on the band. I think they could put a record out tomorrow with the right motivation, and we'd all be on board with it. I don't think that the band is best represented as whatever Josh Dies wants to do this week, but that's kind of what they were. So we should give them credit for all of the heavy that we got, and maybe we should be a little bit nicer for the less than heavy that we got, because this is the same group that gave us No Sir, and you should listen to Showbread.
No, I'm a meathead. Just give me No Sir all the time. I don't care. No Sir. It's all about me, Joe.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
My album of the week is Norma Jean, All Hail. Got that on vinyl for Christmas. Love it.
Buddy, what about you?
I'm going to have to go with Long Live by the Chariot.
For me, it's a Plea for Purging. Depravity. You couldn't stop this if you tried.
Well, we did it, guys.
We did it. Showbread. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 album minus 2. Or, well, actually, 9 albums minus 2. 11 total. 2 we didn't get to cover.
Take us out, DFT.
Have you ever been listening to this podcast and thought, man, I really want them to talk about a band that they haven't talked about yet? Well, the only way you can really get us to do that is to let us know. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can reach out to us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can reach out to us on Instagram at discography discussion, on Twitter at discussmetal, or at discussmetal Dan or discussmetal Joe. And you can always send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. And if you go on our Facebook, you can actually click on a form that I posted there that is specifically there for band suggestions. You can throw in a band suggestion and give us a little bit of like a overview of why you think we should talk about that band. That's all been very helpful. We've gotten a lot of submissions so far. You can always talk to us directly on our Discord server. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you right to Discord. And on top of that, we also have a Discography Discussion official group on Facebook. All of those are ways you can reach out to talk to us. So if you don't reach out, then it's your fault.
And on that note, this has been episode 151 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money!
It's time to open up your eyes.